everyone. Happy Friday afternoon.
I feel like we got the best or not great slot.
No, we got the best one.
If you're leaving, you should totally come back in. This is going to be the best conversation.
Yes, and you guys can all sit up front.
And since I know people, I can call them out by name.
Yeah, 100,000%. So Leanne and I consider ourselves a little bit like troublemakers, like good troublemakers. We get into good trouble. And so instead of doing a moderated discussion, we're just going to have a conversation because we're good friends and we're good friends with a lot of you. And we want to make sure that this flows well. And if you guys at any point have a question or a comment, is it okay?
Totally fine with me.
Okay, so we're going to do this a little differently than most. It's going to be really fun.
All right. You ready to kick it off?
I'm ready.
Wait, audience, are you guys ready for this conversation? Awesome.
There we go.
In the spirit of good trouble, Chessie, you have really positioned Miami-Dade County to fuel its growth through innovation, which is often a buzzword, but not actually something that people translate well into practice. Talk briefly about what does your vision look like for shaping a future-ready Miami-Dade?
So I grew up in Miami and I moved away. It's sort of like the opposite of your story.
Yes.
You didn't grow up here and you came here, and I moved away because I didn't think that there were job opportunities here. And as we're thinking about innovation, we always think about economic innovation because we want to make sure that the innovation that we drive has economic benefit here in Miami-Dade County. And so for us, our focus is on super targeted industries that can be future-proofed as much as possible so that where there's going to be growth and where we can align our talent with those industries.
Yep.
And the basis of that work for me is super personal, which is I have 2 daughters and I really don't want them to go away. I want them to live next to me, you know, like in the house
forever.
next door, just so that they have a little bit of space, you know, and they have a little bit of privacy when they're older and have their own kids, but like still right next door. My husband says that I shouldn't say that out loud, but that is the dream that I'm trying to manifest. And so we have to build out this economy to make sure that we have really, really good jobs that are future-proofed.
I love that because oftentimes when we think about economic innovation, to your point, it is divorced from the realities of day-to-day.
Yeah, I think it's super hard. And also, look, government is always behind the trend on government doesn't innovate, right? Unless you're at DARPA. Is there anyone here from DARPA?
I think there were earlier.
Okay, so DARPA is the coolest. It's Department of Defense, and they do really advanced research. They're definitely innovating. Unless you're in that position, government doesn't innovate. What it does is it provides services at scale really, really well. And so for us is how do we work with the private sector to do that innovation? So Leanne, you talking about my kids, I say that MDIA, the Miami-Dade Innovation Authority, is my 3rd baby.
You do often say that.
I do often say that. Leanne is probably annoyed that I say that. But the Miami-Dade Innovation Authority was founded with this idea that we're going to drive more public-private collaboration. And Leanne is the amazing president and CEO of the Miami-Dade Innovation Authority that has grown it to be a huge, huge force for good in 2 years, very, very quickly. And as you think about Miami as an innovation center and having been here, what are the gaps that surprised you or the opportunities that surprised you at MDIA?
So it's interesting, yeah, and I love that you gave that introduction, and I will admit it is truly your 3rd baby because we talk about it all the time. But
she admitted it, guys, so please, whoever has that video, send it to me. I really want that. Perfect, thank you.
But the interesting thing about MDIA is it really is the vehicle that I wished more cities had and more communities had, because we're focused on bridging the biggest gap, which is between the public sector and private innovators. And oftentimes we know that the public sector is well positioned to serve people, to address issues that impact quality of life. You know, at MDIA, we're focused on housing, healthcare, mobility, resilience, and digital services, kind of removing those friction points between how constituents interact with government through technology. But the biggest gap that we have actually learned to solve for, or that we think we have, is to change the incentives and create a common language and platform for startups to engage with government. And I think it's been in big and small ways. I think the biggest ways is our Public Innovation Challenge program is really this interesting vehicle that de-risks the process of innovation. And a lot of times when you think about government and innovation, you think it's an oxymoron because they don't go together. But we have learned that through this Public Innovation Challenge platform, we can actually ignite a culture of innovation within departments like the airport, which already had an innovation team, but really kind of amplify that within the port. The Department of Transportation and Public Works. We've worked with Parks and Open Spaces. All of these amazing economic engines that are delivering services, but often there's this delta between the rate at which the private sector and innovators come up with solutions and deliver these market-ready solutions, and the capacity of public sector entities like municipal government to find them. And I think one of the ways that we are learning to bridge that gap is through procurement, which is not a taboo or dirty word, but is actually something that I've learned to surprisingly love. And what has been interesting is we've been able to fast track the process of going from a company, which typically maybe would have taken 18 months, 24 months to start a conversation and get their technology even to a pilot stage. We've been able to reduce that by 2/3. So 6 months or less for a company, a startup, to participate in the challenge and then get to a pilot. And that's been very fascinating to know that government can be efficient and be effective at the same time.
I love the fact that you talked about incentives, because not everyone, that's the magic of public-private partnerships, is aligning those incentives.
And when we think about public-private partnerships in action, honestly, from an economic development standpoint, it boils down to dollars and cents, because that is how you measure the efficacy of the work. Now, under your leadership, the county has seen, I think the number is about $937 million in capital investment, and the launch of major programs like Strive 305 and the Film Incentive Program. I'd like for you to talk about what role strategic partnerships have played in really achieving that type of growth and prosperity, because oftentimes when we talk about partnerships, like, everybody could be a partner,
right,
but there's a big distinction between a partner for the sake of partnership and those strategy-driven partnerships that drive the outcomes that we've just mentioned.
You know, I think aligning incentives the way that you're saying is super, super important. I also think that making sure that you're understanding expectations, and that is a place where there's a translation that is needed between the public sector and the private sector. People in the private sector tend to, and I experienced this when I was in the private, they tend to be a little bit more direct about where their bottom line is. With government, it's a little bit harder to understand where the bottom line can be, because you have to serve all constituents. And so making sure that you are clear about those expectations is what, for us, has driven a lot of those strategic partnerships, because people know what they're getting into.
Yep.
I want to say one more thing, what you said. I want to restate it because I just think it's so important. Leanne has been able to get companies to pilot with the 14th largest county in the United States with a GDP of $200 million in less than 6 months. That is awesome. That is amazing. And so you should absolutely scale it to other cities, because I've never seen anything like that.
Well, I think speaking of what's surprising, this has been my first foray into interacting formally with government. And when we were talking about getting MDIA started, way back when, I didn't know 6 months was fast. Like, I was like, 6 months, that seems like a very long time to me. But, you know, there are often these impediments to moving quickly that we have been able to really identify where there's often room for improvement. One of the things that we're working on at MDIA that we absolutely want to bring to other markets is this assessment tool to help municipalities and other public sector entities understand their readiness to fast track innovation. And I think the critical thing about MDIA's work that often I sometimes forget is it's really about marrying speed with efficacy and impact. And some of the things that we have learned that are critical to fast tracking innovation is to assess on the front end before you launch an initiative. And there are like 5 factors that we look at when we're talking with the different departments that we think that more municipalities should start to evaluate and really benchmark where they are and measure growth. So the first is really understanding, like, does this department or government have the capacity to fast track innovation? And what that looks like in practice is, are there champions like you? Do you have buy-in from the top down? Are the incentives aligned to make sure that there are no roadblocks that come up when you launch a challenge? The second piece, which has been huge, and I don't know if Margaret's here, but shout out, I see Anna, and the team from the technology and information technology department, but do you have the capacity to pilot? One of the small things that we've looked at is, how do you build the infrastructure to deal with technologies like AI, technologies that are building digital twins to help with predictive analytics around traffic? That sometimes requires more work than the solicitation that is put out there. Really quickly, culture of innovation is huge, making sure that there's not a fear-based approach to trying something new, but rather there is an appetite for risk and an opportunity to just try it without a fear of retribution or shame or some type of negative outcome. And then finally, making sure that there's like economic incentives around innovation, measuring efficiencies, looking for opportunities to reduce costs, looking for ways that you can make it easier for employees to do their work, and then most importantly, a track record.
But you said something there that I just want to double click on, which is the incentives for people that work in government. And then you talked about de-risking, that government can help de-risk. One of the things that I am still most impressed with of the work that you've done with MDIA is that when you present a challenge to the departments, you present a partner that will legitimize the findings outside of MDIA to lower the perception of risk.
Yep.
Can you tell folks a little bit more about how you did that?
Yes. So the way our challenge process works is we partner with different departments to identify where there's a problem set. And what I think is important to focus on is the traditional way that the government buys goods and services is through procurement and RFPs. And that is by saying, here is the solution. Do you meet this, yes or no? It's kind of like the grade school. Will you date me, yes or no? But that doesn't work for innovation, because often there are solutions that expand well beyond how we think about solving the problem. And so with our work, we are able to work with departments to invest $100,000 in the winners of a challenge. About $300,000 to $400,000 per challenge is what we invest. And that kind of de-risks the entire process. They get a free pilot. They get a process with an entire outsourced team. If you see the MDIA team, guys, wave your hands. An entire outsourced innovation unit to help find great solutions. And they actually find solutions that are often what was not on the radar, because we are expanding the surface area of where we're casting the net to find innovation. We have, in the last almost 2 years, been able to attract more than 350 companies across 4 different challenges. And when we look at that cohort of applicant companies, it represents about $6.5 billion in revenue. But what that really means is Miami-Dade County has 357 new innovative solutions to problems it has. And that is definitely de-risking the process.
That is awesome.
Chessie, one of the things I want to focus on for you is when you think about all the things that you've accomplished, one of the big highlights is the Tech Hub. I want you to talk very briefly, I know we're running out of time, but that has resulted in, more than $19.5 million in investment from the federal government. I think more than $30 million in infrastructure investment in general. What does the Tech Hub mean for the future of Miami?
So we just got the sign to please wrap up. So we're going to do this quickly, which is, Miami, since 1992, has been working on sustainable, resilient infrastructure because of Hurricane Andrew. And we haven't been touting our story, which I find incredible, because we are really, really good marketers and brand experts. But I think that we missed an opportunity. And now we have an opportunity to change the narrative around what we're doing. Not only change the narrative, but it's fact-based. That we are the center of gravity for how you build for extreme weather conditions. And this used to only apply to Miami, but as we saw in North Carolina this year, as we see in the traditional places, as we saw in LA, we need to make sure that we are building differently in order to better adapt to our changing weather conditions. And so for the Tech Hub, it's planting a flag that we are the place where this technology should be built. We are the place where you should come and work if you are talent that is in these areas, and that as academic leaders and entrepreneurs, you should be building from here. And so far, we've seen a massive amount of investments. We have seen many more investments coming to the startups that we're working with from the federal government, but also an acceleration of private funding. And most importantly, we are developing solutions that are going to apply around the world and that are going to give us access to those markets.
So we've got the wrap-up sign, but if you had to complete the sentence, future ready, what would be the word that you would add?
Agility.
Ooh, future ready means agility.
Yes.
For me, I would say future ready means opportunity.
Oh my God, there we go.
Awesome. I think
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.